Moving on up. All right. We are moving to a new city. Surprise, we're moving. Just kidding. But we're talking about moving today. We are diving into the topic of moving to a new city. This is something that I'm actually surprised at how often people ask about this on social media. Like, could you talk about your move across the country? Or talk about even just like moving within like a city within your state. But sometimes like the big moves are really what people want to talk about. And I think it's for good reason, because it's a massive life change, like big event. I mean, similar to like a wedding or something like that. You're changing up everything about your life, and it is hard. It is really, really hard. And so we're going to kind of talk about it, and I'm going to share my experience with you guys, but then also share some things that kind of helped to ease that transition. I want to preface by saying it's really hard, and you got to give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of time to kind of ease into this transition. So growing up, I lived in the same house my entire youth, my entire childhood career. I was born probably not in the house. I was born and then brought home to the house and then lived there until I moved out for college when I was 18. And I wanted nothing more than to move out of this fucking house. Now I look back and I'm like, oh, I loved my home. It was home, but I was like, oh, I want to change it up. I want to mix it up. I want to get a new bedroom. I want to get a new driveway. Like I want to see the world. I want to see the town of Issaquah. And I really like had this deep ingrained, like, I got to go. I got to move somewhere. And so in college, I moved to the city, into downtown Seattle, and went to college there. And shortly after moving into the city, I started dating my now ex-husband. But I had plans. I had signed up for, I can't remember what it was called, but something over like abroad. I was going to go to Italy and study design for a semester. And I met him and I was like, I'm love struck. I can't travel the world. I have to fall in love. And I stayed home. And that was what I had to do at the time. I don't necessarily regret, like, okay, because I know that was like where my heart was at that time. But I look back and I'm like, shit, like I missed out on some serious opportunities to explore before like having kids. And then we got married, had a bunch of kids. Like we bounced around houses a little bit. Like I think we lived in like 4 houses maybe. And there's something like great about like moving houses within your city or within your like area, I would say like all of our houses were within an hour. It's great. Like it mixes up your routine a little bit. Some people are like, they don't like change. I love change. I live and die for change. Probably unhealthy to some degree. But I was just talking with producer Courtney over here, and I was like, this space is different every time, this podcast studio. I was like, it feels like my living room. Like we grew up constantly changing furniture. Maybe this is why I like change. Courtney clearly also likes change. Anyways, but I never felt like there was a big enough change, right? Like I knew that I had in my bones that I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of this place, where I've grown up forever, which was Seattle. And I knew that like I needed this, but you're busy, you're raising kids, you've established your community, you have a family here, all of these things. And it wasn't until like I hit the summer of me that light bulb went off again. And it was like, hey, remember you wanted to actually leave this place? It's time. And man, it was like one of those things that was a blessing and a curse at that time, because my life was already just on eggshells, and I had gotten so accustomed to listening to myself and validating my feelings that this was one thing I was like not going to be able to shake myself out of. I knew the minute that like thought kind of popped back in my brain of like, you should just move. Like, don't you want to explore the world? It was like this devil on my shoulder. Like, don't you want to see the country? Like, don't you want to be somewhere else? Don't you want to mix it up? Like, life is short. And I was like, you fucking motherfucker, shut up. But I listened to that gut, like that instinct, that calling. And I was like, we got to pack up our shit and move across the country to Nashville, where we know nobody and we have no reason to live there except for that it's fun. And I think we should just pack up and go. And my husband at the time was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I was like, okay, cool. That was kind of the dynamic. And that was, I think, in like May or June, and we moved in August. So like, but prior to that, we had like plans to be building a house, which fell through with COVID and everything else. And we just like, I kind of came to this place where it was like, we have family there, which has been the greatest loss, I would say, like from moving across the country. And we have friends with whom a lot of them I still stay in touch with very closely. Ray, who's on the podcast a couple weeks ago, actually was like one of my very, very best friends in Seattle. And we would see each other regularly and whatnot. But like it's somebody that I still keep in touch with. I still see on occasion. And I would say for any relationship in my life, the trade-off of like staying and not listening to that like calling within me of like needing to get out and go and move, the trade-off has been worth it. Like, losing some of the intensity of those relationships, the trade-off has been worth it to be able to be in a new place and kind of listen to myself and like the needs that we had as a family. I guess I would say one thing from that is like, if you are young, if you're listening to this podcast and you're young and you have no kids yet, or even if you're alone or you don't have kids, like having that freedom, I like highly, highly encourage you, if you feel like, oh, I want to move, I want to get out, you can always go back. It's so much harder as time goes on and as your kids get older, it's so much harder to move. It's still very possible, but it is a lot harder. So anyways, when we moved to Nashville, we left all of our family. Everybody, I would say all of our family, aside from one of my brothers, is in Seattle. And it was like the very unpopular opinion. It came with great resistance. I remember, never forget my sister being like, what the hell are you doing? You're taking my kids from me. Because she had just had a baby. And so like, I think she wanted our kids to grow, obviously, like our kids to grow up together and all these things. And I was just in this place of like, I have to trust me. I have to do what I need to do. And I think this is a really common problem is like, people feel like, well, I would love to move, but I can't because my family's here. I would love to move, but it would kill this person. And it's like, there's some scenarios where it's like, okay, like that's totally understood. Like you got to do you. But like for me, I was like at the point where I was not listening to my own needs in fear of like disappointing everybody else in my life. And I was like, I can't teach my kids to do that or be that person or catered to everybody else's life. Hello, that's the entire purpose of everything we're doing here, right? And I get that like you're going to piss people off. You're going to break people's hearts. You're going to make people sad. My mom was devastated. I mean, like she said on the episode about grief, she really grieved like our move because we saw her every day. It was a massive part of her life gone. And there was a lot of times where I felt sick with guilt about that. But I also was like, I was so driven by knowing that like this was my truth. This is what I had to do to continue moving forward in my life. And I knew that I remember very vividly, there was a moment where I was driving up the hill to my parents' house and I was like, I can't do this for the next 30 years. I can't drive this same route and do the same thing and run these same errands. I have to get out. Like I felt like I was being my individuality or my growth was being stunted by being in this one place. And that's just that was my journey. And I had to accept that and acknowledge that and realize that like, that's okay. It's going to hurt people. And sometimes the things we need to do for ourselves are going to break barriers. They're going to frustrate people. They're going to make people sad. They're going to piss people off. And yeah, there's ramifications for that sometimes, but it's also, if you're truly following your gut and like knowing that this is something that you have to do for you, the flip side of that is really robust and beautiful and expansive and important. When we got here, like, and I would say from that point forward, I was already in this, like, I had a tremendous bravery, which is kind of what catalyzed this experience. But I will say, like, I never really looked back. There was not a moment where I was like, fuck, what did I just do? Or I'm so sad I miss Seattle. Of course, I miss the people in my life, but that's the extent of what I miss from living there. And I felt like this massive sense of freedom. And also I had this incredible trust that I had ingrained in myself of like, you did something that you wanted to do for a lot of years and it's paying off. Like it's working because you feel like you're good here. And I just was like, it was a fresh start and it was exactly what I needed in my life at that time. With all this being said, I know that there are scenarios in which people move for jobs or they move to go to family, or there's so many reasons that people end up moving. And so sometimes it's not a choice as much as it's a have to. And I think when it's a choice, maybe it's a little bit easier in some regard, like at the landing spot, it's probably a little bit harder when you like, people are like, but you don't have to move. Why would you want to leave your family or why would you want to move? And those conversations are a little bit harder than like, oh, we have to move for a job or whatever. So I know that there's multiple circumstances here at play. But I think once you get to where you're going, the circumstances don't change, which is like, how do I settle in? How do I get involved? How do I find my way? How do I feel comfortable? How do I feel safe? these are all really common questions that people ask. And like, how do I make friends? I think it's moving in and of itself to like across the country or a big move is really challenging because you strip yourself of all the main characters in your life, all of your comforts, all of your like, I know where my nail salon is. I know which grocery store I go to. Where's the gym? Where do I take the kids for a fun Saturday afternoon activity? You strip yourself of all of those things. And I personally think that it's really healthy. I think that it gives us a fresh start. And I also think that like it forces us to be a little bit more resilient and a little more brave and put ourselves out there. But I understand too, like the depths of which like that is hard because it's really, really, really uncomfortable. And I remember moving to Nashville and being like, so where do people go to like get a cheeseburger? Or like, where do I take a package to go? Like, where's the UPS store? Like all of these things where you're like, oh wait, this stuff used to just be like ingrained in my brain. I didn't even have to think about it. And now it's like every decision you're making comes with like, well, where is that? How do I get there? What is that? Who goes there? Like, what do I need to do? So here's a couple of my tips for if you're moving cross country and like kind of how to settle in, so to speak, and some things that may ease your transition. Number one, you need to become a professional friend maker. And this is uncomfortable for 90% of the people out there. If you are like, I love talking to people and blah, 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 maybe you won't have any problem with that. I generally am allergic to the public and feel like they're outside my realm of like needs. And so typically making friends has never been like high on my priority list. But when I came here from Seattle and knew literally like one person, I remember I knew one person, I was like, shit, I have to figure this out because I'm not going to be isolated. I moved here for a purpose, which was like to start a new life, and I need to figure out how to make friends. So I gravitated towards this one friend I knew. She got me involved. Like she would be like, hey, all my friends are going to brunch today. Do you want to come? And I would say yes to everything. Like you have to be the yes man. You are going to happy hours. You're going to brunches. You're going to fundraise. Anything that you get invited to, like you have to say yes because you don't know, like your best friend might be around the corner. No, but like truly every opportunity that you get invited to is an opportunity to meet a friend. And it's really important you just start putting yourself out there. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I just moved to town. Like, oh my God, I would love to, let's hang out. Let's grab a drink. Again, I met Ireland, one of my very best friends, in a bar parking lot. She was like, I love your eyelashes. And I was like, do you want to be my friend? Like, do you want to hang out? It was like, sure. And then she was like literally at my house 2 days ago. Like, I have a sty in my eye. Can you help me? And laying on my couch with like a hard-boiled egg on her face. Life hack. Anyways, but she's become somebody who's very, very dear to myself and my kids and all of the people in our lives. And those are like random friendships that you find that I think it's just important if you like flow with somebody, if you feel like there's a vibe, asking for their number, asking if they want to hang out, like putting yourself out there. It is okay. Most of the time, people are craving connection and they're not going to just be like, ew, no. Like they're going to be like, yeah, oh my gosh, I would love that. Let's do it. Maybe if they don't want to, they're not going to invite you. Okay, cool, whatever. Like there's 10 more other people that you can, reach out to. But being a professional friend maker is like number one. Everybody has the potential to be your friend, whether it's the guy who's working at a shop or the bartender, or everybody has the potential to be your friend. Like you have to look at it that way. So like if you're out at Free People and there's a girl at the counter and you're like, you guys are chatting and you're like, hey, I just moved to town. I know this is going to sound weird, but like I have no friends, like would love to like hang out with sometime, or like maybe like, grab a coffee at Nordstrom Cafe, like on your break or something like that. Like I'm just trying to find my way around here. If there's a bartender, like truly, like there's so many places to meet friends, but you just have to look at everybody as like, ooh, are you my new friend? If you have kids, getting kids involved immediately. We had kids registered for sports before we even moved here. So I think the second day we lived here, Baylor started his first baseball practice. And that was crucial because first of all, if you have struggled making friends, like you will have no struggles once your kids start sports and school activities and other things, because there's so many people around all the time, so many parents who are in the same phase of life likely. And so again, those people, sit on the bleachers, don't bring your own chair, sit on the bleachers, mix yourself with those people, asking them like questions like, oh, okay, where are you guys from? Or what do you do for work? Or truly putting yourself out there in those scenarios, but getting your kids involved immediately will make that a little bit easier. And then also getting yourself involved immediately. So if there's something that you're passionate about, whether that's like working, like volunteering at an animal shelter or volunteering at the kids' school, or a business happy hour, networking happy hour, These things exist all over the place if you seek them out. And nobody is going to come and knock on your door and, well, maybe your neighbor, but like otherwise nobody's coming to knock on your door and be like, hey, you want to hang out, stranger? And you're going to be like, yeah, sure. You have to be the person that seeks that out. And it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but it will change the direction of your move because you will immediately start to feel like, oh, I've got community here, and you'll feel settled, and you're going to get invited to a restaurant, and then that's going to be your restaurant that you like to go to. And before you know it, you've created this whole cycle of finding friendship, finding places, and you're then part of the community. Even things like joining a gym. Even if you're like, I don't really like to work out, okay, but join the gym for like the social aspect. Go to like a Pilates class where people are talking. Just find places that people are. Go to little boutiques and meet the people who are working there. Researching what people do for fun on the weekends or where they go, like where the local people go, and then going there. It's easy to be like, oh, I've heard a lot of people go there. That place sounds fun. No, go. Actually go. Bring your family, bring your kids, set up a picnic, bring an extra bottle of wine that you can share with somebody. Like always be thinking like, how am I going to extend my olive branch? You are a professional olive branch when you freshly move somewhere. I think this is like the key. It is absolutely crucial. Becoming a regular at a couple local spots. So in the area we live, there's a lot of like fun restaurants and bars, and we have picked like a couple places that we go very consistently, and you will start to see the same people, and you start to become a familiar face to them. You start to see familiar faces, you start to talk to them, and before you know it, like you have friends in your neighborhood, in your area that like to do the same things you like to do, and you've created community immediately. Google, Thumbtack, Yelp, neighborhood Facebook groups, get in all of those things. You will learn so much so quickly. People will be like, oh, did you know there's a parade for 4th of July or this going on? We moved into a new house, and truly, like, I think it was like, we hadn't even officially moved all of our stuff in, and there was like a knock at the door, and the kids were like, Mom, there's a lady here. And I went and answered the door, and this woman's like, hey, what day are you guys moving in? And I was like, oh, this day. And she's like, okay, good, because the whole street's closed down on this day. We have a whole street parade, and it's going to like the food bank. And so make sure you guys are here. It's going to be so fun, telling us all of these things. And I'm like so excited because it immediately, we've lived in this neighborhood, but immediately it like helps you to meet all your neighbors and gets you kind of like right in the flow of things. Another thing that I found really helpful was having someone come stay shortly after we moved. So your house is going to be in a disarray. We had like boxes. I don't even know that our moving truck had made it. And one of my older sisters came and visited and stayed like for 2 weeks. And it was so nice because it was like, this is where we live. I have no idea what's going on or where we are, but like come explore with me. It gave me like a little bit of, it was like a soft place to land. And I think like planning that, whether it's a friend, a family member, something, having somebody come shortly after you move and be in your space with you, it's just like, it gives you a little bit of like that taste of a home without having to go back home right away. But which leads me to my next point. I do think that like scheduling something for a few months out after you move to go back home is like a very nice tether to that. Like you know you're going to be back at this amount of time. So it's like, oh, I'm going to miss my favorite coffee shop. Or you can plan a date with that friend knowing like, I'll be back in a few months. Like we'll see each other then, or family especially. And one of the things that I think I've realized, and I don't know that this is a universal experience, but I think that it sort of is like, you're going to realize like you actually like where you live. You like your new spot. And yeah, you might miss like a few of the comforts of home. Like again, your favorite restaurant or your family or whatever, but you're not going to be like, oh, I wish I didn't live there. Like I'm coming back home, which by the way, you can always do. You can always return back home, but you're going to get back there and you're going to be like, oh, I actually this doesn't feel like my home anymore. Like I have a new home now. And you're going to realize that like you've actually made it. You've actually come into your own and found your own place and found your own rhythms and routines and your new favorite coffee shop and your new friends. And that doesn't mean all the old friends have to go away. But there's space for both. Another thing that like comes with this is like, how did you tell your family you were leaving? Or how did your friends, were people upset or whatever? And I cannot voice this enough. And it maybe isn't even always like the popular opinion, but you have to live for you and your family, not for all of the other people around you. Everybody is going to get over you moving. They're not going to wither away and die if you're not there. And I think it's a good practice to be like, well, what do I want? Yes, I know my mom wants me to stay in Seattle. I know my sister would prefer that I'm here. Of course, but I'd also prefer that they're here. And I'm not going to sacrifice everything in my life that I want so that those people can be happy, because what that does is just creates a really codependent relationship, number one. But number two, like, where does it end? Where do you draw the line of like, oh, but I'm going to do this because they want me to, they don't like, I'm going to do this because that's okay with them, but I'm not going to do this. And for me, it was like, I had a tremendous amount of bravery, but I was like, I know I want to do this. There's nothing holding me back. The only thing holding me back is like that my family lives here. And then I would hear myself say that, and I would write it down in my journal, and I'd be like, I don't want my kids to live like that. I don't want my kids to stay in Nashville forever just because I'm here. Like if they want to go move to Italy, or if they want to live in, San Diego or whatever, like stay classy, like go. And I think it's really, really important for us to set that example for our kids, but also just to remember, like, it's our life and we're the one who has to live every day in and out of it. And, yes, you're going to cause grief. You're going to maybe have some really uncomfortable moments, some uncomfortable, hard conversations. But at the end of the day, I promise, like, you will likely look back and be like, I'm so glad I did that. There's not one moment that I've regretted moving. Yes, it's come with some hard times, whether that's like not having support for like our kids right out of the gate, or, like childcare or whatever, or just like not having your family close by, or not having like your comforts and whatnot. But I would never in the million years, there's not been one moment that I would have traded it to stay there and keep doing the same things that I was doing. So if you're considering it, or if you've already done it, hopefully some of these things help, and happy moving. Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram @KendraForNow. See you next time.